Welcome to Secrets from the Saddle podcast. I'm Sylvie Dow, your host, fellow cyclist, bike club founder, cycling coach, bike race junkie, just truly super passionate about cycling. My journey with cycling started 20 years ago when I opened a spin studio, started a women's race team, and founded a women's only cycling club called Cycle Fit Chicks. I'm super thrilled to reveal all aspects that make the world of cycling operate. I'm so excited to be able to bring you interesting people from around the world, pro cyclists, recreational cyclists, coaches, event organizers, bike shop owners, everything and everyone you need to know or ever wondered about when it comes to cycling. I know you'll enjoy this episode. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Secrets from the Saddle, All Things Cycling podcast with your host, Sylvie, and we have Sam Hansen, who I had the pleasure of meeting in Kansas, Emporia, Kansas, at Unbound Gravel. Now, Sam happened to be in the same fairground campsite as I was, and they were friends with the campers beside us, and we all became friends. And I asked him to be on the podcast because he has a very special place in the sport of gravel, because Sam is a non-binary cyclist. He is also a math and stats librarian and podcaster from Southeast Michigan. Now, I have asked Sam if they would come onto the podcast and talk about non-binary athletes and how the sport is shaping for they to come into the sport, and how it's created a comfort level for cyclists or non-binary athletes in the gravel cycling world. So I'm really super excited to have Sam on here to talk about this and just to educate us all. So let's get to it. All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Secrets from the Saddle, All Things Cycling podcast with your host, Sylvie Dow, and the amazing Sam Hansen, whom I had the pleasure of meeting in Emporia, Kansas at Unbound Gravel. We were, I would say, tent mates, I guess. There was a whole gang of us at the fairgrounds, and he was there, and I was able to meet them and ask them to be on the podcast. So let's get a little bio on Sam, because I think he has an extraordinarily cool background. So Sam Hansen is a non-binary cyclist, and that's one of the main reasons that I asked them to come here, and we've got some really cool topics that we're going to talk about. They are also a math and stats librarian and podcaster from Southeast Michigan. They started racing in 2014, but it was not until 2021 at Vets Park CX, so I guess that's cyclocross, in Ann Arbor, that they were able to race for the first time as their full, authentic self. So Sam has also worked with very hard to increase inclusivity within the cycling community, working with a number of race promoters to introduce non-binary and gender-expansive categories. And so I'm really excited to have them here to chat with us about sport, non-binary in sport, because more events are starting to include non-binary categories, and how individuals might be able to look at sport as a place to find, I will not say safety, but just a place to be accepted. Welcome, Sam. I'm so excited to have you here.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for having me, and for putting up with the multiple delays in our recording of this podcast.
I think it's totally going to be worth it. So I do have one question before we get started. How did you get into cycling and then into gravel? Well, cycling
Uh,
gravel, but I guess specifically into gravel.
well, let's see. Sometime when I was a kid, I decided that I no longer hated the idea of being on a bike. Loved the idea of being on a bike with training wheels in my basement for a little bit. And
Oh,
then my parents tried to get me to learn at like 4 or 5 outside, and I was having none of it at all. Like I was having so little of it, I might as well just be like a very northern province in Canada. Um, sorry, just a tiny bit. That's my one bit of Canadian humor.
well, you are
And
in Michigan, so it is very close.
well, yeah. If I go just a little bit more east, I can actually travel south to Canada, which
Yeah.
is very, very fun. And so I one day decided, as sort of peer pressured into learning how to ride a bike by the neighbor's kids, the neighbor who we rented a farm field from. And so the neighbor kid's dad taught me how to ride a bike. And then I tried riding my bike home from the field with my dad driving behind me on a tractor. Because this is rural northern Wisconsin that we're talking about.
Yeah.
And then on a blind corner, a car came around in the other lane. Like the car never encroached in my space at all, but they were doing like 55. It's a rural highway. And
Uh-huh.
I freaked out, turned too far to the right and went right into the ditch. And then oddly enough, after that, I enjoyed cycling. Uh, I got a mountain
Wow.
bike that did some riding, and then sort of gave it up a little bit around undergrad through
Mhm.
through the first round of grad school. And then I had just wanted to pick it up a little bit more sort of halfway through the first round of grad school, and I got my first road bike. I'm like, oh, I like this a lot more than the whole like flat bars and like bigger tires thing. These go a lot faster. And then over time, I started cycling more and more. It became my main mode of transport, and I got into cyclocross before gravel. But there was some gravel where I was living in Wisconsin, but not much.
Mhm.
Wisconsin paves more of its roads, and but there was a couple, and I really liked them. There's a race from the state capitol in Madison, Wisconsin, down to the Illinois border that took
Oh.
off at midnight, and it was just a nighttime event. It wasn't really a race. I treated it like a race. I was down at the border for a good 15 minutes before the next person showed up. And it was like, oh yes, I like this going fast on gravel thing. I have to take a lot less corners and accelerate less often than I do in cyclocross. Uh, and then
This is true.
yep, very true. And then I moved to Michigan, and I hear there's a lot more gravel. They pave almost none of the roads, and the gravel roads tend to be smoother than the paved roads because our road maintenance is awful. Literally the worst in the country. There has been quantitative studies on road quality, and now that
In
I have a
Wisconsin?
platform, no, in Michigan.
Oh, in Michigan, really?
Wisconsin's are fine. Michigan's are terrible. And now that I have a platform to share this conspiracy theory, here's my personal conspiracy theory about it. The automotive industry, huge in Michigan. So they make sure the
Mhm.
politicians do not take good care of our roads, so we have to buy more cars. That is my personal conspiracy theory that I've decided is definitely true. But on the positive side of that, terrible roads, great gravel. Really good gravel around here. So I started riding it a lot more, and then I started. I had an event here that wasn't really a race, but it's something my local club puts on, Ann Arbor Velo Club, where I'm a member. And then the next year, I'm like, well, and this was the year after Abby Robbins at Queer Gravel on Instagram did their first Unbound, and so that was the non-binary podium that
Mhm.
made just huge amounts of news. And so I started following Abby and realizing all the amazing work that they are doing, that others were doing, and that non-binary categories were a thing, which I just didn't know before that point. And then
Right.
I worked to get a gender expansive category at my club's local CX race, which we did that year. That was Vets Park. And then the next year, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to start doing these things. And so I went down to Midsouth. and
Oh, okay.
took second place in the non-binary category after Apollo. And then after that, it was just, I guess the right words, off to the races. Like I got non-binary categories added to a bunch of the local gravel races too, so that I could race in those, because I
Right.
decided in 2022 that my rule was no racing if I am not recognized as my whole self. If I am not able to be there authentically, I'm just not going to do it.
Right.
And so that's what I did. And I raced so much. I raced so much more in 2022 than I have so far this year. But it was very expensive and took up a lot of time.
Funny about that,
So
right? Race
yeah,
registrations, travel, bikes, repairing bikes.
yeah, yeah. So since it was so expensive, and non-binary racers, with the exception of one who just so happens to be a professional triathlete, uh,
Oh,
don't have don't have any financial backing, which it, like, I understand, but also if we have these companies out there saying that they really want to support inclusion, that they want to support equity, well, then guess what? You should also, try to put some money in the other categories. And also, I have a great pitch to anyone who wants to, maybe sponsor an athlete. I have finished on the podium on every single race that I have done since 2021. Uh,
nice.
every single one. So if you want someone who's on the podium a lot, which, mind you, I would not finish on the podium in the men's or the women's races. In the non-binary races, I somehow get on the podium. And therefore, if you want just a lot of like being able to say that you have a bunch of podium finishes with your racers, I'm a perfect fit. Just think of how many podiums you could get if you just paid me to go race more races. I'm
Oh,
not
you're
expensive.
funny. Have
I
you put
just
it
want
out there to many companies?
I have tried, and
Ah,
most of the time I don't even hear back. Some I hear back, but like they're on this weird like loop. You have to do it in a certain time on a certain year. It's all a whole thing. But yeah, really, I just and not even so much me. Like there's a couple of non-binary racers who are going to be truly great racers. Like especially if they can be given the money and the time that is necessary to do it, because like I mean a big part of why professional racers are so great, right, is because they get to do it as their job. Like they get to
oh yeah.
focus on it. They don't have to spend 40 hours a week doing something else, or in a lot of cases 40 hours a week doing something and then 15 hours a week doing something else, because no one can afford to have one job and live in the United States, at least
Or
comfortably. Not if
Canada or anywhere else, actually.
Yeah, yeah, and
It's a good
especially
side
now if you want
hustle.
to, yeah, and if you want to buy expensive bikes and go to expensive races, you really have to do that. And so like there's some racers out there who could be like world class level racers if they had the support. Now, I personally don't think that I'm necessarily one of them. I think I could be a better racer than I am right now, but I don't know if I'm world class. But there are those who could be. But until we have that support within the non-binary cycling world to have people who can do it as their job, with the exception of the one and the incredible Rachel McBride, who
Mhm.
does get to do it, but not even because of cycling. They get to do it because of triathlon.
Mhm.
And so like we still need the support. I mean, it's the same reason that some of the gaps between even speed between women and men's cycling exists, is because men were allowed to do this professionally for over a century, and women only have been able to start to do it recently. And so the structures and the knowledge of sports science and
Mhm.
all of these things just don't exist. And that is a huge speed boost. It's a huge professional boost. Like it's a performance enhancer, essentially, to have a history of uh, infrastructure and science and everything that exists for them. And then there's well, we get into all the just misogyny and hatred of any sports that don't have to do with men, but we don't have to go down that road.
We don't need to go there. But I did the first time I heard about non-binary categories was, I think it was Rebecca Rush's Private Idaho, and that was about 2, 3 years ago.
It was 2 years ago.
2 years
So
ago.
yeah, and that was the year that Apollo Leonard, who is one of those cyclists who the professional teams should be like sniffing around Apollo to the point where they're annoyed at the number of phone calls that they get. But
Mhm.
Apollo also does not get like doesn't get any people like reaching out and actively recruiting, which is, it's really, everyone, believe me, like I'm saying this pitch, I would love to have support. Someone needs to support Apollo because they could be great.
Right.
And yeah, so I heard about RPI because Abby was also there, but that was after Unbound. So that was
Right. Okay.
after the podium at Unbound. But RPI does also hold a record. They were the first at least major gravel race to have a full non-binary podium.
Yeah,
So
so I think that's what
yeah,
I heard. So, but yeah, and then it started like more, I started hearing more about it. And I think that's also when it started really hitting like non-binary athlete categories started hitting like the media, and more events started adding it to it. Like I added a non-binary category to my event. Nobody signed up for it in any of the categories, but it's there.
yeah.
And I guess it's just like more people need to know about it. So Sam, do you find that now it's we'll be going on to year 3, that more athletes are coming out and signing up in the non-binary category? Like, do you
Uh,
find that they're starting to grow, like those categories and with participants?
there is some growth. Actually, no, there's a decent amount of growth, especially in Midsouth and Unbound this
Right.
year, and particularly in the sort of shorter distances. Um, like
Right.
we're seeing a lot more, which is great because that's showing real community buy-in. But
Right.
and I'm sure that this will come as no shock. There's still like a hesitancy to come out
Oh,
and races non-binary, and for a few different reasons. Some people maybe aren't necessarily fully open with everyone in their life and in their community with
okay.
their gender identity because of absolutely legitimate fears,
Mm-hmm.
both for safety and for job security and things like that. And so
Right.
they don't necessarily want their name listed under a non-binary start list.
Right.
Or there's the other people who are literally and understandably just scared of the people. I mean, if we look at say all of the absolutely horrific abuse that Austin Killips has whenever she wins a race, as because she wins the races because she trains harder and puts in all of the work, but she is a trans woman, which is a woman,
Right.
and but because of her identity, she just gets abused horribly whenever she wins a race, and
Wow.
it's terrible because Austin is both a wonderful person but also just a brilliant cyclist.
Mm-hmm.
And when people see that sort of abuse, even if that abuse, and I truly do believe this, is coming from just a really small amount of the cycling community, it's a
Right.
small amount, but that amount is really loud.
Mm-hmm.
And when they're loud, it somehow falls on the non-binary and trans community
Mm-hmm.
to yell them down most of the time. And it
Mm-hmm.
shouldn't be on us. And there are amazing people out there, like Susan and Kate from Grounded, the person whose name I absolutely, it's going to bother me that I don't remember it, but the person who runs Raspatita, Sally and Bobby from Midsouth,
Okay.
Jason from Gravel Worlds, Jason and Jason's team.
Right.
I
Jason
don't
Sophie.
remember all of their names, and there are a lot of people, the people who, and then some racing teams too that come to mind. Stamina, B Cyclocross, Melanin Base Miles. Like there are groups out there, but we just need like the majority of cyclists to just tell these transphobic idiots to shut up,
Yeah.
like that they are not welcome, that it is not okay for them to be this biased and bigoted and harmful and traumatizing of people who have already had to go through a lot in their lives. Just living as a trans person in this country, in this world, is not an easy thing to do. And then to go and do something, be one of the best in the country, in your sport, in your vocation, in your hobby, and then to be just, I mean, exposed to such harmful, vitriolic,
Yeah. So,
terrible words,
Sam,
like it's
can I
not
ask?
it's not fair for them.
Yeah. Can I ask you about your experience, like, and
Yeah.
how long ago it was that you came out and became a non-binary cyclist or
Well, so
non-binary?
yeah, so like I would I would hesitate on the word became
Okay,
just a little bit
sorry.
in that no, there's nothing wrong with it.
Oh,
It's an interesting thing to talk about
yeah.
uh because like I don't think that I ever became a non-binary person. I think I
You
always was a non-binary
right.
person. I just didn't understand it myself. So
Or
it's
coming out, I guess I
yeah,
should.
yeah, coming out. Like,
That's
and
better.
yeah, I was in no way like bothered by what you said. It was just like I like
We can
it's those
reword it. It's
moments.
always
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, it's those moments where we can have a conversation and show that
Mhm.
this is not that scary to try to understand like everything
Yeah.
that's going on. It can just be a conversation as long as everyone is willing to see each other as human beings who understand their own experience. Like my
Right.
lived experience, my knowledge of myself is so much deeper and so much clearer than anyone else's thoughts about who I am.
Right.
And we just have to respect that people know who they are. If someone walks up to me and tells me that they are a woman, I'm going to believe them because that is their experience. That is who they are. I'm a non-binary person. I appreciate that most people that I interact with on a regular basis believe that. And so that is great. And so I have long thought that something was weird with me, something was wrong with me.
Hmm.
Um, like for a while, I thought it was just that I was queer, and sort of going, in and out of all sorts of ideas of queerness. But it still never felt quite right. And then it was the mid 2010s or so where I started to hear more open and clear discussions about the true like breadth of the spectrum of possible gender identities. And I'm like, huh. So that feels that feels like
That more
something that's
resonates
important
with
to me.
you? Yeah.
Yeah, like it's something because I had long thought like, well, there are plenty of feminine things that I like. Like I like all of these things. I also tended to be just as comfortable having feminine as masculine friends and engaging in feminine activity, or quote unquote like social activities that have been socially constructed as feminine, things like facials and makeup, nail polish, all of those things.
I would
Like
say knitting. Oh, go to knitting,
yeah,
crochet.
I am not a
I'm
knitter
just teasing.
personally, but yes, that sort of aspect.
Yeah.
As I was with masculine things, like I have long played sports, both individual and team sports, and in an era, I came up in an era where those were coded very masculine overall, and other things like tech stuff, things like that, and so that all always spoke to me. I was as comfortable,
Mm.
hanging out with the women as the men in my life. And because of that, actually, it got to a point where I was much more comfortable hanging out with the women. Toxic masculinity took a turn sometime in the aughts, and I sort
Mhm.
of didn't really enjoy it that much anymore. But I realized that like, huh, this is it. Like maybe that is what has always felt sort of off. And then when I did more research, I looked more into the idea of non-binary identities. And I'm like, huh, that that fits. And I did what a lot of queer people do in their life. I tried it on in
Right.
different situations, like in situations like a conference for, I was in grad school for a second time by this point, so like conferences for that grad school, or like at the grad school, like it was with my class, was the first time that I used they them pronouns. was just with them as the second year of grad school. I'm like, yes, this actually feels good. But there was still plenty of people in my life who that was not the pronouns that I was using, because I thought maybe they would push back a little bit, or I just wasn't quite ready. Like it felt somehow easier with this group of people who I had a more transactional relationship with, right? Like they're just other students in a class. I'm not going to have a lifelong interaction with them. If I decide this isn't right in 2 years, they won't know any different.
Right.
But it ended up being right.
Mhm.
And so I'm like, no, this is actually who I am. Like this makes me feel even seen by myself in a way that I had never properly felt. Like I understood myself more deeply than I ever had. And it was such an amazing feeling to finally be able to put a name, a word, an idea to this feeling of being slightly off that I'd had most of my life. And so I was able to do that. And it was just wonderful. I didn't come out in cycling until 2 or 3 years after that, because while I would have felt comfortable with it with the people on my team, this was when I was still in Wisconsin. It's a team called Revolution Cycles. They are wonderful. All of them would have been fine with it, but I didn't trust that of everybody else.
Mm.
It's I'm able to be out now mostly because I decided to not care, and that I carry a lot of privilege within myself. I pass as a cis white man. I am 6'4", 240. I am not physically intimidated or have any tendency to feel physically unsafe.
Right. Yeah.
Without it being a large group of people who are all like angry with me at the same time. So like I carry these privileges, and with those privileges, I decided at some point, especially with people like Abby and Apollo already like really vocally being out there, like this is, I need to also be doing this, so that if there's a kid like me who really likes cycling but hasn't really thought about everything else, and if they can see that, oh, just a second, like I can be more than what a picture of I'm trying to think. Michael Woods won the Tour stage yesterday. I can be
Yeah.
more than this 5'7", 120-pound white man. I'm sure Michael Woods weighs more than that. Sorry, Michael.
Probably not.
But maybe not at this point in the tour. Not after that stage. But like there's all sorts of people who can do this, and we need this for people with expansive gender identities. We need more queer cyclists to just come out. I should say we need more queer men cyclists to just come out. As per usual, there is a lot better open representation in women's cycling. It just as there is in general in women's sport. But in order for that to happen, we need the environment where they can feel safe to do it. Because I imagine the reason they're not coming out is the same reason we don't have many out gay American football players or soccer players or basketball players, because they live in a situation and they have a job that relies on them being accepted by this very, dude bro masculine culture. And so they need the safety, but we also need it all over the place. We need it for, people who don't look like, you're pro cyclists, which is why like All Bodies on Bikes is such an amazing group. And Marley Blonsky is
really,
so wonderful and awesome. And we need more, Black cyclists. We need more cyclists that look like every possible identity that exists, because we have an overrepresentation problem right now. And a lot of times, without being able to see it, without knowing that there's someone else who is there, who shares some of your identities, I just don't think it is. I feel that it's a lot harder. It's always harder to be one of the first few people than it is to be like, oh no, there is going to be a community. And that's why I really have to thank people like Abby and Apollo, because I knew there would be a community, because they already did the work before I did. And so I'm just hoping to help them and make this space bigger. I mean, at that point, it was not just Apollo and Abby. I need to also name Casey. Casey was doing a lot of work, and so was everyone with Wild Composites. And
Oh, I'm not
what
familiar with them.
so Wild Composites was RAR before it was the RAR's racing team, Radical Adventure Riders racing team.
Oh,
But
okay.
then they spun off because the racing and the other group didn't quite work exactly. So yeah, Izzy and Charlie and Lily, like all of these amazing people who have been doing this wonderful work, making cycling a space that non-binary people and gender expansive people can feel like they have a community, which has been my favorite part. Like I go to these races because I want to hang out with my friends. Like racing is fun, but the friends and the family that I've made through like my queer cycling community has been
Well, I was gonna say I
it's one of
saw
the
that
best things.
a big group of you at Unbound.
Oh yeah, yeah. And we know each other from these races. We get to see each other 5-6 times a year, and it's great. Like we get to hang out. We get to give each other hugs, and we get to talk through all of the bad things that we've had to be dealing with recently too. Like
Right.
it's always good. It's always great, I should say, to have a community that really understands you and can can be there for all the complaints and everything else without having to translate it. And I'm not against having to translate my experience for other people so that they can better understand. Like that's okay.
Right.
Like that is work that has to be done, but every once in a while you just want to not have to. Like you
Right.
just want to talk and just know that you're among people who are just going to get it. And that's what I've been able to build with all of these wonderful people who I will name drop to the end of all my time talking about cycling, because it's them that is the reason I am here. It's not this amazing thing I'm doing on my own, even though like
Mhm.
I ride on my own almost all of the time. And during races, I am mostly on my own, but I'm not at that race by myself, even
Yeah,
though
I totally
like,
get it.
yeah, the actual time racing is the like it's lovely and wonderful. And I love type 2 fun. I don't know why. It's a
Type
problem.
2 fun.
Uh, but like that isn't the thing I look forward to the most anymore. It used to be going to a bike race. The most important thing for me was biking. And
Yeah.
that's not true. That's not true at all. The most important thing to me is my queer cycling family. That is what I care about more than anything else.
So would you say, Sam, because like we kind of talked about how cycling, or maybe it's just gravel at the moment, is creating that kind of um, community for non-binary queer cyclists to come out and feel inclusive and supported. Do you find that, that's really kind of like that's where cycling, or just to say gravel, is moving, because a lot of event organizers are getting on board with supporting?
Uh,
I don't know, is that a big
little
question?
little
I
little
don't
column
know.
A, little column B.
Well,
Uh,
because you would know more than me. I mean,
oh
I
yeah.
just got into gravel. So, and it's opened my eyes. Like, first person that I talked to was um Bethel. I don't know if you remember
Oh yeah.
Bethel.
I'm B and I go way back.
Yeah, so and then it was Raish, and then I added it to my category. So I'm just kind of like following suit, I
Yeah.
guess. Um and and putting it out there so
Yeah.
non-binary cyclists or athletes have a place to participate.
Oh yeah. And so like it's column A and column B, right? Like there are places that do an amazing job.
Mm-hmm.
And really, like I really think the absolute pinnacle of all of the places for support is Grounded, Nebraska. Grounded goes so far above and beyond to
Is that a
support.
place?
So no, Grounded is a race. It's
Oh.
adult summer camp. It's adult cycling summer camp. But Grounded, they the support that they provide is
Mm.
absolutely top notch. Susan and Kate they go all the way. They make sure that they have an advisory board that is made up of people with all sorts of different historically excluded identities from within cycling. They provide actual support programs for teams. This year it was for some of the Native Women Ride group. And so that support was not just like, here's a free entry. That support was like, here are people for you to connect with. Here is actual like training to come out and do the race and everything like that. And they are wonderful. So there are places like that. And I've also heard amazing things about Rasputin. They and Grounded work together a lot. I just haven't been to Vermont for that race, so I can't speak to
That's where
what
I've
they
heard.
do.
Yeah.
Yeah. But then there's other races that also do a really good job of supporting. Like Midsouth this year actually had a media coverage of the head of the non-binary race, which was
Oh, wow.
something that none of the outlets wanted to do. So they paid some of their own people to go do it because they wanted to make sure everyone had equal coverage. Like that is amazing. The work that Christy has done with Lifetime, making sure that like this very, very big, like, sort of, name and lights sort of race and event has space for non-binary riders, making sure that people like Abby, Casey, and Apollo could screen their documentary that they did, that they were able to screen this year. So like that work has been great. Gravel Worlds has a DEI panel the day before the race, which is also good. So there are these races that do really a good job, and there are others that well, let's pick one that's been in the news
Oh,
recently.
yes, you had one that you wanted to talk
Yeah.
about.
So I was never going to ride Belgian waffle ride race anyway, because I had heard some things. But now I'm definitely not going to, after their announcement yesterday that only people who have a woman on their birth certificate can take part in the women's race. And then there will also be a category for men. And then there will be a category that they call open, which is for people of any gender may compete in that classification. Oh, and I should point out that it is the men's category. Trans men are allowed to race as men. Just trans women aren't allowed to race as women. Because, yeah, and this is a rather standard thing, is that trans women, especially in sport, are targeted significantly more than trans identities of other genders,
Right.
other trans identities. And
that,
yeah,
especially in
and
swimming and
yep, yeah, this is generally true across sport. And so yeah, like that's an openly transphobic move. They're essentially creating a list of people that the trolls that BWR is currently apparently trying to target as their main demographic are going to be able to use essentially as a list to target for hateful abuse online. Go through the comment thread for that post, which is a lot of my wonderful friends saying, "Oh, that's terrible. How awful for you to ruin waffles for all of us." And then you have absolute trolls and really awful people saying terrible, degrading things about women, and specifically trans women, but just women. And so like that is awful. I mean, we have other cases where the Michigan cyclocross whole series added gender expansive as a category last year, largely because of pushing from my cycling club here in Ann Arbor. And that was wonderful. I really like that. Washington also had a state in their state series. So the states of Washington and Michigan last year had a state non-binary or gender expansive winner, like a state champion, which is wonderful. I have a jersey in the other room from it. And after that, we were really excited. And there maybe were other states. Those are just the two that I know of. Then we were really excited to go to USA Nationals last year. They had a non-binary race in
Oh, wow.
cyclocross for nationals last year, which at that time I'm like, wow, USAC, you actually listened. Like you listened and you did something good. And I remember either typing up or saying to a reporter at that point, like, I'm really excited. I'm glad that this can show growth from USA Cycling, but let's see what they do next.
Right.
And then they did something next, which was the awful, absolutely awful transphobic survey that they sent out to some small amount of the USA Cycling members earlier this year that involved just bad survey design, like putting an inclusion question followed by an exclusion question that used the same Likert scale. And you wouldn't necessarily know that if you answered 5 on one, it meant that you had to answer 1 on the other. Likert scales, like if you have a shift in the style of answer, like one has to do with like how positively do you feel, and the next one says how negatively do you feel. You
Right.
can't have those right next to one another. Like you will never get the right answer. And also they made it so that you could essentially take it as many times as you wanted. I know I took it more than once, essentially to show how bad, and it was never sent to me in the first place. I was never even supposed to take it.
Oh,
And so like they did all of this, and now I don't want to take part in cyclocross nationals this year because I don't think that a group that does something like that without thinking about the harm that it could do to the trans riders who are members of the governing body. I don't think that they should be able to like burnish their DEI credentials by having a non-binary race with my face on it. Like
huh.
that's not okay. And I don't believe that that is a feeling that only I likely have. Like these are actions being taken that are also really negative. And there's sort of similar ideas. The areas of cycling that you would expect to be the most for like open to all sorts of different identities are the ones who really are. Like if you want great inclusion, go to the grassroots ones like gravel or like
Right.
cyclocross, or even better, if you want more inclusion, go to bike polo and like alley cats. Like those are areas that have long had spaces for the queer and the weird and the people who don't fit in society's buckets. Like that, those are the people who've been doing those things forever. And then mountain biking is another one that like it deserves to be with like gravel and cyclocross. And then you could go to a place like road, and you could imagine outside of some very specific like grassroots crits and stuff like that, most of the road community, I don't want to show up to races. Like
Right.
also I think that there's maybe been one road race with a non-binary category, and I sort of forced that by demanding that they do it. Otherwise, I would not take part in it, which is generally how I've gotten non-binary categories added to races. Just be like, hey, I want to race and I want to give you money, but I'm not going to do it unless there's a non-binary category. So it's your choice. And most of the time people want they just want another participant because like they tend to be small grassroots races.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
like the big races, things like that, like whatever the road version of Unbound is in the States, like we have terrible road racing, like we all know that at this point, but whatever that is, there's not a non-binary category.
Yeah, I feel it like cycling, road racing is kind of a little behind. Like I myself have not participated in like almost 10 years in a road cycling event, you know, but I can see it being very behind, like old school kind of deal like that. Hmm.
Yeah, yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. So moving forward, how do you are you well, let's say I have to ask you a little bit about your background because so before we got started on the podcast, I was asking Sam about his background because he's also a podcaster like
There,
myself. Huh?
there. You
Oh,
just,
there.
yeah.
Is also a podcaster like myself, and but a math and stats librarian. So, would you share about your is your podcast open right now? Like,
So I haven't actually produced a podcast in like 2.5 years or so,
oh,
but you can find them very,
yeah,
very
I saw
easily.
it.
Yeah, yeah. So I am a podcaster also about mathematics. So I started podcasting back in '09 when I was in grad school the first time. So that first grad school was for mathematics. So I have a master's degree in mathematics. And I learned while I was there that I enjoy doing math. Like I do. I enjoy doing the research. Graph theory was a lot of fun, but I love talking about math. And I
Oh,
truly adore talking about mathematics and talking about it with other people, interviewing people who've been in it for a long time, going out actually reporting and producing stories about it in a more in-depth way. So I've started a number of podcasts. The first one was just like me and some other grad students sitting around the table making pop culture jokes and being very vulgar, occasionally talking about math. So essentially what you'd expect
is that
from
one still available? Available?
technically it's online somewhere. I'm not going to give you the name of it though. Um,
Ah,
uh, no, it's just not. No, it was called Combinations and Permutations. You can find it at acmescience.com. And so
you?
I produced a number of different math shows. So Combinations Permutations was the panel show. Strongly Connected Components was the long form interview show. Did 60 some of those. I did a math news show. Did 100 some of those. That one was called Math Maths. That was with Peter Rowlett from the UK. That one was on Pulse Project, which I think is gone now. So I think that those episodes are they're not lost per se in that I have a copy of all of them, but they're not available online. So if anyone wants some of those, please let me know. I'm happy to give you a link to a Google Drive folder with them in it. And I also did a science storytelling show called Science Sparring Society, where it was just me telling a 10 to 15 minute story about fights from the history of science, which was a
Oh.
lot of fun. Some scientists really, really have to work on their anger issues. And then eventually I started making relatively prime stories from the mathematical domain. And that's the show I'm most proud of. It's at relprime.com, relprime.com. And that's the one where I was successfully kickstarted the first 2 seasons. I've won awards from it. Like I was able to really like tell the stories I wanted to tell. And I've been working on getting it back off the ground. I had to stop during the pandemic due to health-related issues. Oddly enough, nothing to do with COVID, but other health-related issues. And I haven't been able to start it back up. But I've told stories about things like the AI that defeated the game of checkers, stories of the mathematical notation behind some juggling inventions. A mathematician who was surveilled by the Stasi in East Germany, mathematics of gerrymandering, the grad student who ended up developing the lottery for distributing retail cannabis licenses in Washington state. I've talked to musicians and I've done comedy sketches. Like it's really a
You're gonna
huge,
have to dive
wide.
into that one.
Well, if it is, the whole idea is to give people one positive memory about mathematics, because mathematics
I
truly
think
is
more
this.
people need that actually.
Yeah,
So it's like, I hate math. I know, but you have to work really hard at it to get it. And then once you get it, it becomes
I don't
fun.
actually think you have to work that hard to understand it.
Some people do.
So this is my whole thing. You were exposed to some math teaching that didn't work for you. It is not
Most
that
likely.
math
It
is
was back
hard.
in
It
the
is.
80s as well. So let's just think about that.
Well, it is. We have a societal and sort of subconscious message about math, that it is hard and that it is this thing that only some people can get. That's not true at all. Everyone can get it. It's just that it is not taught in a way that many people can. Many people can, that works for them. And there's plenty of research that actually shows that this is very true. So it is that thing. And I think a lot of it is that people automatically come with the assumption that it's hard. They come with
Yeah,
this belief that they won't ever get it. And it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy in many ways.
I could
And
see that.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so all I want to do is to tell some stories about math so that the next time people hear math, they don't respond with the I hate math. because it isn't. You hate the idea of math. You don't actually hate math itself. You hate the way that math was, that you were forced to interact with math. Like there, and you were traumatized around math, which is all, like, I am not trying to dismiss any of those things.
All elementary school kids.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I know I was talking about like honoring people's lived experiences, and I just told you what you do and do not believe, or do and do not feel. But really, I'm just trying to sort of change some of the language around it, because it is, I truly do believe that there is something you hate, and that there is something you are traumatized by. I just don't think it's fair to name that thing math.
Maybe it's for my kids. It's me teaching them math.
I mean, it could be.
I could be the bad teacher.
Well, and so like with this, you have stories that you think of first instead of thinking about like that time where a teacher made you feel terrible about yourself. You could instead maybe think about this amazing fight between a computer and the greatest human checkers player of all time, Marion Tinsley, and how those two ended up coming to an understanding and even grudging respect of one another before the end. Like, yeah, like this is math. Math is a human pursuit. It's a creative, artistic, wonderful pursuit, just like everything else. And we remove it and minimize it by talking about it in this very rote, mechanical way, that it's all like arithmetic, essentially, which it's not. Like, I find arithmetic dull. I don't love doing it. I will use a computer or a calculator whenever I can. I don't love the idea of doing, I used to, mind you, when I was growing up, I did love the idea of doing 2x2 multiplication in my head. I adored it. Now, I don't want to, but I do want to think about the patterns and the logic and the structures that exist within mathematics, how the null set of the integer magic spectrum of fans is different than it is for wheels, which is literally, that was my thesis. Is
That's something that throws all off. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks, man.
and so all of that said, I love talking about math. It's one of my favorite things to do. But it turns out that talking about math is not a job that pays me money. It's a job where I pay money out to do it, which means that over the, like, sure, I kickstarted the first 2 seasons of Relatively Prime. I also lost a lot of money on both those seasons. I was never expecting to make money, but I was really hoping at some point I could get paid to talk about math, because I love doing it, and I actually personally happen to think that I'm pretty good at it. And so I ended up having to take various jobs over the years. I was a data analyst for a software company. God, I hated that. I hated that so much. Not the data analysis part, the software company part. I did not love the culture of that job. And eventually I became a barista because I love coffee and I actually find it very mathematical. And so I was super into that. And I found I was doing my normal like mathematics communicator, which is a job that exists in the UK, but pretty much nowhere else.
Tutoring? Like, I find it hard.
Oh God, no, I don't want to do that. I don't have interest in teaching people math. I'm also not a great math teacher. I want to tell stories about math. I want to communicate math, but I want to do it to a wider audience. Like, just helping people like solve a problem in their homework doesn't really speak to me. I would rather be a teacher than that. And I'm actually better as an overall teacher than I am directly as a one-on-one tutor. But I stumbled on for this. I just did this search once a month in Indeed looking for math communication jobs. And I'm in
there right now, actually looking for jobs.
I never found it, but I did stumble on a listing for a STEM librarian at the Colorado University Boulder, CUB. I'm like, huh, a STEM librarian? That makes no sense. Like, what is this? Just a librarian who thinks about STEM topics? That actually sounds really cool. I should look more into that. And I'm like, oh, that is a thing. Just thinking if that's a thing. Well, if I abstract out the idea of STEM librarian, that means that there's probably other disciplinary librarians. So maybe, and this was me using my math brain, abstracting out a general idea to get back to a specific. Math librarians must exist too. And so I looked it up, and math librarians did exist. And I got very excited because there was even one in the town I was living. And so I'm like, oh, can I come visit the math library? And they're like, yeah, sure, of course. I don't even think I ended up doing that. I just applied to library school within like a month or two. Actually, maybe within like 3 weeks of seeing that job listing, I applied to a library school and I got accepted. And then I
A
went to library school.
library school?
So yeah, to be
A librarian.
usually
Like,
usually to have the title librarian, you also have to have a master's in library science or a master of library and information science. There are some cases where that is not true. It is something that is changing, thankfully. There is more cases now where people who just have a lot of experience in libraries can get the title, which is something that I approve of.
like my
But in the
mom that's been
academic sphere,
volunteering for 20 years.
yeah, in the more academic sphere, it is like it's essentially a requirement. Though
Right.
you can have a disciplinary PhD and still then become a librarian without going to library school. So that's another thing. But I don't have a PhD in math, so I needed my library master's. So I went back to school and got that, and then actually a semester before I even finished, I got hired at my current job. They did not hire me for my library skills. They hired me because I'm a mathematician as well. Because it was literally a math and statistics librarian position, which is actually really rare these days. There's not that many straight up math librarians left because there's just been consolidation. Libraries have less money, therefore they can hire fewer people, and so people end up with consolidated jobs where they're covering more disciplines than that. Usually,
Right.
the most common collection is physics, astronomy, math, also known as PAM. So I do have a PAMily, which is the group of other physics, astronomy, mathematics librarians that are a part of the PAM community in the Special Libraries Association. We legitimately call ourselves the PAMily. It is the nerdiest thing. But as a
This is
math
so
and
cool.
as a math and stats librarian, I support the research and pedagogical aims of the mathematics and statistics departments at University of Michigan, Ann Arbor. And that means I, maintain the collections. I make sure that we're getting the books and the journals that we need. I answer reference questions when they come in. Today, I had some about formatting of dissertations, as well as another asking to get a book, asking to purchase a book. And I also, I help co-teach a course. I'm teaching like math communications things and some information communication, as well as like version control and stuff like that. I am constantly at conferences and other things, working on international and national committees, stuff like that. So I do all sorts of things. It's a specific type of faculty job at a university. That's really what it is. I just happen to be within the library.
That I found that super fascinating. I hope our listeners found it fascinating too, because I one of the things I always love is diving deeper into my guests' backgrounds just to see, what they're all about when it's, when the cycling stuff is gone, like what do they do? And
Well, I mean, that's only one of my 2 jobs.
uh,
Because
oh,
remember what I said earlier
oh, I know
about
you're
needing
trying
to
to
have a
get
second job.
sponsored.
Yeah, because right now I have to work 2 jobs. And the other is I'm a database developer for digital humanities projects at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. So like I literally work for 2 different universities. That one is only like 8 hours a week, though. It is a much smaller job. And so, yeah, I have done work on the only database and archive of podcasts called Podcaster. That's podcastre.org. And this literally is a full and proper archive of podcasts. It's not all
Like of
podcasts.
all podcasts?
No, not all podcasts. It is
Oh,
not of all podcasts. But if you want to add yours, there's a add a feed link right at the top of the podcaster website. You can add
yeah,
your RSS feed there,
I
and then
should
your
add.
podcast would be archived if you want to. Anyone who's listening, if you have a podcast, you can add your URL there, and we will start archiving it. That is entirely fine. But like, we only have so much space, and we had to stop adding things automatically because it was getting to be a bit much. It's only a few hundred terabytes of audio files right now. And so we've decided to make it a little bit more community driven.
Right.
And so people are just adding. Then I also am the database developer for the Media History Digital Library, which is a archive of old trade magazines and other cultural magazines and books that primarily focus on early Hollywood. But also we have some TV magazines and some radio and theater magazines as well. We recently added a bunch of press books from, I want to say Universal, but I could be wrong about that. I'm mostly the tech side, not really the cultural side of it. But we have a bunch of new press books that have been added recently. And so if you like old movies or anything like that, I thoroughly suggest checking out Media History Digital Library. It's
Okay, which one was that?
mediahist.org. Media History Digital Library, mediahist.org.
Mediahistorydigitallibrary.org for
Oh no, mediahist.org, mediahist.org.
Oh,
The name of it is Media History Digital Library. If you
okay.
just go to a search engine, type in Media History Digital Library, it'll take you there just fine.
All right, Sam. So before we end, what is next on the agenda for some racing? Because the summer's almost over. I know, like it's not really over, but the fall is like a big time for gravel because it's like, such nice, better weather than the summer. But and are you going to be back at Unbound next year?
I can't answer that question yet. I haven't started planning my next year. I don't know
What?
how much. I don't know how much money I have. I don't know what type of support I have. So
Well, I know I'm going to be there, so and at
I'm
the
planning
fairgrounds.
on being there. I really want to be there because again, I will see my career cycling family there, and that is important. But I'm not gonna try to predict 10 months in the future right now. It feels like a really long time these days. So next on my schedule is a local event called Watermoo, which is really great. It has a river crossing that is way too deep to ride through, and it's flowing. So you actually have to walk across it. Some years it has been so high that it's up to like above my waist. So there are people who have actually had problems. They've had to have other people carry their bikes because they are too short to
Oh my
actually get through it.
gosh.
Yeah. Yep, that's a thing.
That's
So
fun.
Watermoo, it's great fun if you're in the Southeast Michigan area or anywhere in Michigan, Northern Ohio. Definitely come out. It's a great race. Our race promoter, so this is one my club has put on, it does a really great job. And you get street signs at the end. Like that is everyone's finishing thing is a street sign, like a plastic one, but a street sign from one of the roads on course.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
super cool.
Yeah, so that is a ton of fun. But then racing wise, because that one I'm not gonna really race that hard. I have Gravel Worlds, then immediately followed by Queen Stage Race at Rebecca's Private Idaho. So
When
those are
is
my.
Rebecca's Pride of Idaho?
That is the last weekend of August.
Oh, okay.
Is that it's also known as Labor Day weekend if you're in the United
Yes.
States.
Yeah. Okay, September. Ah.
And so those are next, and then after that I am planning on a nice full cyclocross season, and hopefully going to a couple of out-of-state races. Right now the only out-of-state big race I currently have on my calendar is King's Cross in Ohio, down in Cincinnati area, which is one I'm really looking forward to. I've already been talking with the race promoters there to try to get a non-binary category added. They were very receptive. I am trying to reach out to Trek because I have put on races at Trek. I have raced Trek many times because I was in Madison, and they are 35 minutes outside. And so I've raced cyclocross there a lot, and I've yet to hear back. So if anyone has an in with whoever puts on Trek CXC, I would love to hear from you. I'm also reaching out to Ozcross, which is the one in Fayetteville, Arkansas, to try to get, because again, I want there to be big races for non-binary riders to be able to compete against each other in that are not nationals, because I really don't think, again, at least as of right now, and I'm willing to have USAC prove me wrong, and for them to make movement and help support and protect trans non-binary and gender expansive riders as they should, as the governing body for cycling in the United States. But I'm not holding my breath either. So
Might be
I
still
am,
a little bit more work in progress, right?
yeah, I am actively working to try to make sure that there are other races. And if anyone is interested in how I have managed to get race organizers to sort of listen and add the category, please reach out to me.
That's a
You
really
can,
good point.
yeah, you can easily find a way to contact me at samuelhansen.com, or you can just email me, sam@acmescience.com. As a matter of fact, you can put whatever you want in front of @acmescience.com. It will all go to me. I will even send out like interesting math books that I have doubles of to anyone who comes up with a really intriguing before the @ symbol. Because I have a catch-all email address. So literally anything that ends in @acmescience.com all comes into my inbox.
Oh, I like that. So there you have it, everybody. I say guys, everybody. You know where you can find Sam, and definitely if you have questions, or maybe you're looking at adding, like, you don't know how to approach an event organizer with adding a non-binary category, Sam is the person to reach out to. All his their contacts will be in the description below. And yeah, and so maybe just showing up at an event and looking for Sam would be a good way to go as well. So
yeah, I'm rather recognizable.
yeah, remember he's seven.
The,
No, not 7, 5, 6'4".
yeah. Remember, just look for the really tall person, probably with like a Gays OK cap on. That's
I like
pretty
your
much all you
queer
need to
one.
know.
That was another one.
Yeah, but
And
the
really
queer one
cool
only
glasses.
gets the queer one only gets worn on race days. Like that is my race cap.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, then you can't really miss them then. So thank you so much, everybody, and thanks for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and please do share it with somebody who you think would benefit from listening to our conversation. With that, have an amazing day. Don't forget to follow both of us on socials. Sam's contacts are below, and on Instagram and YouTube for the podcast. Thanks a lot, everybody, and have a great day.
Thanks for having me. Bye, y'all.
Bye. All right, friends. Well, there you have it. Sam Hansen, they, them, non-binary cyclist. It is becoming more of a conversation, a topic obviously in this world of sports and cycling. And it's definitely a conversation to have. And for, I don't know about you, but it's becoming a learning process to really learn about what all of this means, and trying to understand the individuals that it's affecting. So I'm really happy that Sam came on here and we were able to talk about that. And I'm adding more, have a couple more people that I know that I can share with you and share their experience, and that you can share this with somebody who you think would help. And I like to say that gravel is creating a good and competitive, safe, fun space for non-binary athletes. So for that, have an amazing day. Please share this and follow us on socials. Take care, guys, or take care, everybody. Bye. Thank you so much for spending this time with me on the Secrets from the Saddle podcast, learning more about sighting people, places, and things that make cycling such an exciting sport. I am so glad you stopped by today. Please leave me a review if you feel so moved to do so. I would love to hear your feedback. And if you could take 1 second to share this episode with someone you think would enjoy it, I would be forever grateful. Also, if you could please leave me a review if you feel so moved by going to iTunes and leaving me an honest thought and an honest comment, telling me what you think, and most importantly, tell me what you'd like to hear more of. It would really help me to bring more great, inspiring cycling stories to you. Until then, have an amazing day, make sure you ride your bike, and don't forget to visit my YouTube channel if you'd like to see the full version of this podcast live.